hata hii maminista wameteuliwa, sisi hatuna shida, kwa sababu sisi katika eneo hili bado poteza chochote. Rebecca Miano amerudishiwa yake. Murang'a tumepata, Kirinyaga tumepata, Kiambu tumepata, Embu tumepata, Meru tumepata, Nakuru tumepata. Kuna shida. Wale Tharaka Nithi tumepata. Kwa hivyo yale wote amefanya, sisi tumekubali. Yangu nimetetea na imefanyika. Mimi nimesema niangaliliwe hii, imeangaliwa. Sisi tunaendelea. Kwa hivyo hakuna shida na sisi tunaendelea kuwa waangalifu.
That is Rigathi Gachagua speaking over the weekend about what just happened, but also he said this about what people are saying in regards to his place in the current power matrix.
All sorts of analysts and newspaper people and commentators commenting about gains and losses. Which region got what, which one lost, which one didn't, who is strong, who is not. I think the whole thing is a win for the people of Kenya. And for us as a region, we are very happy that Mercy adds our numbers.
Honorable Mbui, before all this, and listening to Honorable Gachagua, he's dismissing that there is no question about who got what, but he himself also says that the region has maintained its numbers. Never mind, I think there's a difference of one. That is why we have one more in Nyanza. But before all this, before the finance bill, there was a conflict between the president and the deputy. Honorable Koech is talking about political survival. Could it be that this is an answer to the older question, but also moving forward, how does Parliament convince Kenyans that actually we heard you and you're resolving what challenges we have expressed over the past 6 or so weeks?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I think, Sam, when you listen to the Deputy President, it's very painful when he talks about Murang'a has, Kiambu has, I don't know, Tharaka Nithi has, Meru has. I come from Lower Eastern. Machakos may have, because if Alfred Mutua is from Machakos, and I would be asking, what does Makueni have? What does Kitui have? We have 47 counties. We cannot speak about positions that way. The real issue here is that I think the biggest problem we are facing is that we are still operating from the old order before 2010. That's where the problem is. Because the Constitution, if the President was just to implement the Constitution as it is framed, then we would not even have these problems we are talking about. Because he would realize that the Constitution does also indicate under Article 10 that you have to deal with regional balancing. Now, when, you know, Koech has told us here, 49% of, in the last election were people of Azimio and 51% Kenya Kwanza, and therefore they have to be, represented. We will be represented if you follow the Constitution. The problem here is that even the resources are skewed towards the sides of the people that have, voted in a certain way. And that is where we are in this problem that we are facing as a country. It is important that whoever wins the presidency must know that they must unite the country by making sure that when it comes to political appointments, when it comes to, resources, you must be fair to every part of the country. I said this the last time I was here, and this is a fact, and Koech was with me in the House. When we asked about the last time KRA was recruiting over 1,400 young people to go around, following up on the tax payments. And out of that, we found out that some counties like Kwale had maybe 2 or 3 people. Kilifi had actually 2 people. Yet one constituency in Kenya, somewhere in Mount Kenya, I think it is Thika Town, had over 50 people recruited under that arrangement. Over 53% of the people that were recruited are from 2 ethnic communities. So the problem is that the political class is still playing that game of that we are the winners and therefore we take everything, and the rest of you did not win, so you get nothing. If you go to the US, and I think our constitution is borrowed very heavily from the US, there are 2 big political formations, the Republicans and the Democrats. For the general public, what matters is what is it that the Republicans are offering us this time. And when they get into power, they do not ignore the ones that are not on their side. Everybody, every citizen benefits. Because if you are talking about healthcare, healthcare is not going to be looking at who is a Republican, who is a Democrat. When it is issues to do with education, it doesn't matter who is in Kenya Kwanza, who is in Azimio. The problem with Kenya is that our political leaders have refused to, to understand the new constitution so that they can be able to, to give solutions that are current. Now, we have a very weird situation. Part of the ODM party, which belongs to Azimio, is going into government. 4 members of ODM, the top leadership, 2 deputy party leaders, a chairman, and the chair, I think is a minority leader who's also, I think, holding office of director of political affairs, I think, in ODM. Mm-hmm. They're going to be, they've been nominated to be appointed to be CSs in the Kenya Kwanza administration. Now, we are in Azimio. They are part of Azimio. How then do we start, relating in the House? The chances are that some members may feel that now, because the members of our side have been appointed to cabinet, therefore now we start voting in support of everything that is brought on the table. Mm-hmm. Some, I'll tell you, that was the reason why Wiper and a lot of members, I'll tell you, there are also a lot of members of ODM that are still disgruntled about this move. We believe that we have a role to play. The Constitution is very clear about majority and minority. We are in the minority. We will play our oversight role. We also want that the members that will hold the offices of chair of PAC, chair of PIC, that they be able to carry out proper oversight without any compromise, because the problem is compromise. Now, I would want to ask myself a question. What would be the interest of going to become a CS in the Kenya Kwanza administration? How is it beneficial to the country? How is it beneficial even to your region? Because I saw people celebrate and say, oh, now we're in government. Does that mean that when somebody is appointed to be CS, their area is going to get skewed development, they're going to get more roads, they're going to get more water projects at the expense of the rest of us? That is the reason why the young people have gone to the streets, Sam. Because they feel that the government does not represent the interests of all of us. If you cannot represent the interests of all regions, then you're obviously not going to represent the interests of all demographics. And therefore, that is why the young people feel disenfranchised and ignored. The real issue that we needed to address was the issue of governance, the issue of fight against corruption, the issue of distribution of resources, the issue of making sure there is no wastage. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that the young people talked about. But then when you appoint me as Robert Bui as deputy leader and make me a CS, mm-hmm. How does that solve the problem the young people brought on the table? Let us address the issues that the young people brought on the table, because I think there's a lot that we can do instead of focusing our energies on appointing political figureheads to go and become ministers and hope that because that is a script that was used in the 90s and before, and that's where we are going back to. And I think that's an unfortunate situation that we are in. Going forward, I don't know how the House is going to behave, because I have seen in the past where I was in the handshake. I was in Parliament during the period of the handshake. Right. And I remember when the fuel levy was being introduced, the 8% fuel levy was being introduced by the Jubilee government. We opposed it as members of Parliament. But the leadership, both of, that time NASA and the leadership of Jubilee, ganged up to defeat the members. And it was a very murky situation. Mm-hmm. I was a deputy leader. Incidentally, I was the only one in leadership that opposed that increase. I stood up on the floor and I opposed it. And I said it's not fair. It is going to be punitive. It's going to hurt our people. Right. But all the other leaders ganged up with the leaders of the government side and defeated the House. So I think that is a situation I would not want to be involved in again.
All right, and we'll talk more deeply about that, but shortly, that is shortly. First, let's take a look at, there's a Kenyan who has written to us via X, and this is, Ndeshmo is saying that nowhere did the Gen Z movement call for a government of unity. They only demanded accountability, good governance, fight corruption, arrests of all murderers, police action is what is needed, and not talk. Wanjiru, true, these are the questions. Yet, like he said, there was a political crisis. So the president is having to deal with the questions raised by the young people, but also a political crisis. Is there a case? And how would a politician who is a president resolve a challenge that he was facing, which is about, should I say, legitimacy, but at the same time looking ahead into how to govern politically over the next 3 years?
I'm wondering which political crisis you're speaking to. because going into the finance bill discussion, there was a NADOC process, and you know there were bills that had come out of that.
NADCO.
The NADCO process and the bills that had come out of that from the last round of protests. And so there was already a process that was beginning to speak to some of these political questions. But even if you look critically at those bills and the questions framed, those questions were framed by the political elite. So I want to put it that there is really no political crisis. What we do have is a crisis of lack of leadership from the political side, in that our political leadership under the Kenya Kwanza, under William Ruto, have been unable to govern, and they've been unable to be guided by the Constitution. So they are playing on a focus of power, and the only language they seem to understand is do we have the power, do we have the numbers, do we have our people? And the youth were actually saying, really, it's not about you, it's about us. So the crisis we have is one of a lack of appreciation of public good by our political leaders. And even when Koech speaks here as the chair of defense and says that the protests were a political maneuver, that actually is a symptom, is symptomatic of our crisis, of our political elite that can actually wish away national dissent. Because the crisis really is that the Kenya Kwanza political party, William Ruto, has lost the confidence of a majority of Kenyans, has lost the legitimacy, has lost the right to rule this country and the right to lead this country. And so the question he needed to have answered is to say, where have we failed? And how can we correct it? Had William Ruto raised those questions, I believe even the Gen Z would have agreed to dialogue. But what did he do? The Gen Z framed their issues, and that slide showed what they were, because it's about political accountability, it's about governance, it's about anti-corruption, it's about prudent resource of resources. It's not really about political deals making, not at all. In fact, the Gen Z were like, we don't care about that. And they kept saying, we're not here politically. We are here about governance, software issues, national ethos. So instead of dealing with the issues, and William Ruto's first very easy option, once he disbanded, had he been genuine, because now we can see all this was political smoke screens. This is a showman driving us through a showbiz process, and when Koech speaks here, he's part of that PR, trying to PR Kenyans. Instead of selling Kenyans an untenable position, why not just really respond to the issue? The first thing would have been vet. All these people set aside. What is the constitutional process of any reappointment? Number one. Number two, what is the standard that would meet the criteria of accountability? And I want to put it to you that during the constitution making process, our politicians diluted the provisions of Chapter 6 and put in there that unless somebody has been convicted of a crime or abuse of office, they are eligible to run. So in the run-up to the 2022 election, the EACC had a list, I can't remember of how many, they might have been about 200.
241.
Ineligible to run for office. Civil society then looked at, in fact, they had a separate process. They generated their own list. Their own list based on what? Based on Auditor General report, based on court records, based on COB reports, and said these people really should not be on any ticket. But what have our politicians done? They say, well, constitutionally they can run. So they put people who had murder charges, rape charges, corruption charges, put them on a ticket. Not only put them on a ticket, they wound up in political office. Further to that, after the DPP mysteriously withdrew a whole load of corruption cases, these people were then appointed, these aren't competitive positions. The president appointed people who had cases, unresolved cases of corruption and abuse of office, some even murder, and appointed them into the cabinet. That is the problem. So how would the president have dealt with that problem? It's not through a political settlement. It is by dealing with that standard and saying anybody who has been charged or has ever been charged with any kind of economic crime, political crime, social blah, 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 is not eligible. If he had even wanted to go further, he should have done a vetting and said, I'm going to do a social vetting because there is the parliamentary vetting which doesn't hold water, because as we can hear the chair of defense is speaking more like the executive than he would as a representative of the people. Because our parliament is in the back pocket of the executive, he could have done a social process and said, let me know who of these you don't have confidence in. So that is what the president was expected to do. But he couldn't afford to do that because he doesn't have, he probably realized if he did that, he'll be next. Because once you appoint very good people, then the question will eventually come and say, Mr. President, can you also vet yourself? So William Ruto has an opportunity, had an opportunity which he's squandered, and I don't know whether he can change. He changes all the time. He still has time to change again for the good, to put in place a cabinet that has the confidence of the people. Instead of doing what he's done.
Are there names you feel in the proposed list that have questions of integrity?
Well, I don't even have to say I feel. Who has been cited in a government report? And I'll say there's two. One, and like I mentioned, there's an ongoing case, there's an ongoing question around the conduct of Kipchumba Murkomen, who I've had the pleasure of engaging with, a very brilliant person, very articulate person. These are great resources in terms of their capability. But unfortunately, under his docket, somehow there is this corruption issue that was raised. I didn't even realize it was raised in 2018 by the Auditor General. So where is parliamentary oversight? So part of our problem is Parliament doesn't even do its job, because this issue should have been flagged then. And then, since it was flagged in 2018, how has that matter been awarded?
Okay.
Now, a whistleblower has leaked the documents. There was a private, a confidential procurement for a PPP. Number one, that is not anticipated in the law. Where is the public participation? Because the PPP provisions are very clear. So how do you allow this kind of company to come in and get involved in a procurement process with the government of Kenya? And how does the CS, who sits on that? And I understand when you interrogate these ethnic appointments, I understand we can see that there's an acting ED or general manager at KAA. There have been numerous appointments, because this is all coming out in the public domain. So numerous appointments from one ethnic community, again in the same institution. So since there is a flag, the president would have said, this is my friend, somebody I trust, but there are issues by the Auditor General and in the public domain. Let me first investigate. The other one would be Davis Churchill. He's had numerous public appointments, and in each of those, there have been major issues that have come out. Some have been cleared conclusively by the courts. In others, those investigations couldn't be completed for various reasons. So those are the kind of people
What are those reasons?
Well, you know, if you don't have sufficient evidence, you don't have sufficient documentation, you know, similar to the ICC, those cases were never determined. They collapsed because there was lack of sufficient evidence. So the point is this: the president told us he will institutionalize politics. The Gen Z have gone to the street and said, this institutionalizing of politics, where you raid the opposition politicians, where you walk all over and ignore the election rules, isn't working for us. The president also told us that he's going to run, because we met with him as civil society, and we told him, look, our debt problem is an accountability problem. We want it audited. Some of that debt should not be paid. It's odious. And he said, I want to run rules-based governance. What does rules-based mean? It means that the only standard that you will apply is a court conviction. Anybody who does anti-corruption work will tell you the weakest strategy in fighting corruption is the courts.
All right.
Because it's very hard to
I just wanted to tie, there's a point you raised, and I want to move to the panelist, about the JKIA, and you're saying that public-private partnership is supposed to happen a certain way. The president yesterday, Wole Mombasa, spoke about this particular issue and said he's not a madman to sell a national asset, and said that the public-private partnership is meant to assist the country to change the infrastructure at the airport, saying that there has been a tent there for a whole 7 years. What specific questions do you have in that arrangement?
The company that has awarded, that is being awarded the contract, because this company in India is similar to our, has been involved in scandals like our Golden Bag scandals, and not one. So one, how did they turn out to be the ones who are top of the lead to get this award?
Because I think it was stated by Kenya Airports Authority that a proposal was received from Adani.
Yes, a single one. That is the one that's under question. That's the one that's undergone, the documents that are out in the public domain, that has undergone some sort of public participation, which was not in the public domain. So what we've done actually is we've raised, the civil society, there are questions that have been raised, because we are asking, could we get the documents from an official source?
Okay.
Because the documents from the unofficial source show that there is a single-sourced, confidential, private proposal that came for an issue that seems to have emerged from somewhere, much as there was an ongoing issue. Why was it sourced in the way it was? How is this company even eligible? Because we are talking about a conflict of interest bill, there's an anti-bribery bill, we are talking about blacklisting. If you're going to work with corrupt companies that are blacklisted in other jurisdictions.
Okay. All right.
What are you saying?
All right, Wanjiru, I hear you. So, Honorable Koech, you will have to vet these nominees, because that's how the law provides. You have a responsibility. There's a story published on Citizen Digital, 24th of February 2024. Ex-Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya faces 56 million corruption charges. And you may recall at the time that he was required to appear before EACC. Top on that list is former Kakamega Governor, who allegedly received kickbacks from 6 companies, which were awarded 60 contracts worth more than 2.2 billion shillings, including AFBA Construction Company Limited, Western Cross Express Limited, Sabima International Limited, and Sesela Resources Limited. What will you do with this kind of information if it's brought to the fore by EACC or any other member of the public to your committee, and you have to consider the suitability of a nominee?
They will definitely be brought to the fore, because there's a 7-day for people to submit petitions, memoranda for or against those individuals that have been named by the president to the cabinet. My concern, however, is the profiling by Wanjiru. Her focus has only been, I have a problem with William Samoei Ruto. I have a problem with Davis Chirchir. I have a problem with Kipchumba Murkomen. It worries me. If you have a problem with the cabinet, why is it a particular ethnic community that you seem to have a problem with? But nonetheless,
I apologize, I forgot to mention Oparanya in that list, but it's all of them.
We will deal with it at that point. And then again, she seems to, I mean, Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen,
you know, I'm lost because I don't know whether...
Just allow me space.
Just hold on.
I'm just
I'll give you the opportunity. I'm just concerned. I thought she was, and she's here to defend herself. I don't have to say this, but she's talking about members proposed to the cabinet.
There are so many members proposed. You've just mentioned Oparanya that he has an issue.
Who have accountability issues.
Accountability issue. Good. So I thought it will have been several,
tell me,
not the 3.
When such information comes, what are you going to do?
I'll say this. It is when the president proposes names of individuals he'll want in his cabinet, there is a constitutional process that they are subjected to. It ends up in Parliament. And that is why myself and Robert Mbui and the rest of the team who are seated in the appointments committee will look at their suitability.
Standard.
And I'll tell you this. I have, even in my own committee, and I can confirm, we just don't rubber stamp. We are a team of competent individuals in that house. In my own committee, I rejected one Mr. Kairu, who was a nominee to Cairo, Congo, because in my own judgment, in my committee's judgment and evaluation, he was not competent to be our ambassador, and we've rejected. That was just the other day.
I am very specific.
Was supposed to go.
Sorry, Honorable Koech.
If there was any
in the vetting of 2022,
yes,
there were several reports that were presented to the House, to your committee, on suitability of members. The minority team gave dissenting opinions against Aisha Jumwa and Mithika Linturi. But of course, the majority carried the day. So at least there's a precedent set by your committee.
That is democracy. That is actually the beauty of our democracy.
And that is the foundation of my question, Honorable Koech.
Yes.
So this report to be presented.
We are not a court.
Of course, you're not a court of law.
Yes.
But the president is saying that you're going to deal with corruption.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And saying that we have to respect the Chapter 6, the integrity of public and state officers.
Absolutely.
So if information is raised that this particular person is being investigated on EACC matters, and just recently High Court made a decision about the chairmanship of KRA.
On what that is a good precedent that was done by the court, because initially what we are dealing on, also we must follow the law. As we do that, people who have, just because of aspersions, just because of someone has been mentioned on something, does not mean in any way that they are guilty of what they have been accused of. But going forward, looking at trying to be even more accountable to the people of this country, I see no reason why we should not reject, for instance, such individuals then that have been mentioned, because there has been a precedent that has been set. So you have to have faith in Parliament and in our capability in evaluating suitability of individuals that have been sent for nomination. Remember, it does not even end with us at that point of the Appointments Committee. We will also have to subject them to the whole House to confirm or reject. So it is a very long process.
It is long. Remember, I'll remind you, you wrote a report as your vetting committee to reject Penina Malonza because you didn't think she was suitable for the office based on how she was expressing herself. But the House voted to approve her.
I thought because Malonza really there was nothing that she had been accused of, other than trying to articulate the issues before the Appointments Committee. Let's be very honest. And when you appear before, that panel of members of Parliament, sometimes you get nervous. And sometimes you lose it. Sometimes you don't come out as confident as you'll be. Many people have come to this show, and sometimes for the first time, when you're coming on a show like this, you feel shaken, you feel unconfident. And that is what probably happened to Malonza. And I think we, even in the committee, and Robert can tell you, we said this lady has done well. In terms of academics, she's qualified. In terms of presentation at that point on time, maybe she was just shaken and was a bit nervous.
Do you think you were right?
Let's give her an opportunity.
2 years later, do you think you're right?
In my position, I will not be able to, to comment or evaluate. But generally, as a person, because she came to East African Community where I oversighted for a very short stint, and I think as a person we interacted, and she was very competent. Okay. I will still say that she is competent. It will be.
I think the question I'm asking is about because you said that even if the committee clears a nominee despite adverse reports, that the House will still make a decision, which is the law. But Honorable Mbowe, what should Kenyans expect, knowing that the president has promised that he's going to lead a clean government?
Yeah, first I think Kenyans are now actively involved in this vetting process, unlike the last one in 2023, because if I look at it from this perspective, when we went into vetting last time, we only had about 28 memoranda from Kenyans that were tabled in the committee. As of last week, we already had about 80-something within the first few days. So my expectation is that a lot more will come out and a lot more things will be said about these appointees, and that's a spirit, because the more memoranda we get, the more strength we have if there is any need to reject some of the nominees. But I also want to say that Parliament this time must also stand up to be counted. Members of Parliament have actually felt the brunt of going against the citizens. When Parliament was breached and members of Parliament even lost their own personal properties. And some of them, I can tell you some, have not even been able to go to their constituencies up to now, since that 25th. So I know members of Parliament know it is not business as usual. And that the Kenyans are actually watching. So I believe that there is a very high chance that this time we'll do a better job. But I want to just caution my colleagues, because I mean I've seen this happen. I was involved in the impeachment proceedings against the former CS for agriculture, and it was impossible to even ask the correct questions. It was impossible to move because there was already a predetermined outcome by the members that were appointed to that committee. I think it's important that when members are in a committee, they just open their hearts and their minds so that we listen to what is brought on the table. I won't go there with the intention of defeating any one of the nominees. I'll go there to listen to each of them, hoping that we'll be able to get the right people to serve Kenyans. And I think that's very important. And when it comes to the House...
What do you think should be the place of probably investigations being conducted by EACC, or maybe a case has been filed in court? What do you think that should inform?
I mean, already if somebody, let me tell you, these offices are public offices, and obviously the most important thing required in a public office is trust. So if somebody is already being actively investigated for serious corruption cases, then it is difficult for us to make a decision and say, you continue serving Kenyans as this case is being determined, because it's not the only person who can hold that office. I think, by the way, let me tell you, in Kenya we have this problem of accountability, and also this thing of where does the buck stop? You saw recently in the US, during the presidential campaigns, someone attempted to shoot at Donald Trump. They didn't kill him. They just scratched his ear. As a result of that, the person who was responsible for the Secret Service had to resign. She had to step aside. Now in Kenya, over 75 Kenyans were shot last year in the streets of Nairobi demonstrating. Over 60 young Kenyans have been killed this year. We have seen the Inspector General of Police resign, but the person responsible in the city of Nairobi, Adamson Bungei, is still in office. The nominee for the position of CS for Interior is still the one that oversaw last year's killings and this year's killings. So I have a difficulty with some of these situations.
All right.
But we'll address them. They'll be able to answer these questions so that we can be able to come up with a fair decision.
All
but
right.
at the end of the day, Kenyans need to take responsibility for their actions. And it's a high time also someone is nominated and says no. If I was nominated today, I would just tell the president, I'm sorry, I would rather serve in another capacity than that one. Why is it we are all running to become CSs? There are many other things people can do.
Okay, let's listen to what members of the Azimio movement have said.
Mimi nimetoa direction kama party leader kwa Wiper members of parliament. Hawa majina ya watu wanne ikiletwa kwa bunge kwa kupatiwa idhini, wana Wiper pigeni no. Minority mwenyewe akaenda. Chairman wa ODM mwenyewe akaenda. Now we want to see in ODM, even indeed they say these people went on their own. The proof of the pudding, they say, is in the eating.
Will you do that, Honorable Mbui?
We will listen to them because, like I said, we will not predetermine. We'll listen to them, but the thing is this, if members of ODM are taken through a rigorous, punishment when they went to State House, and when they said that they seem to be leaning towards Kenya Kwanza, I mean, the position in Azimio hasn't changed. Unless a proper pronouncement is made.
Okay.
I believe this is a position not just of the Wiper leader, but the leader of ODM, because he has also said he didn't allow anyone to cross over to Kenya Kwanza. He says Azimio, ODM is still in Azimio. So I believe this is a position of Azimio that these people are rogue. They have actually gone against the party position, and behind our backs they have sneaked into State House to be given appointments. That is a position as I see, and that is why we'll have difficulty.
But Raila Odinga has also actually said, well, we extend our best wishes to the nominees and trust that they will contribute positively to national development. We continue to advocate for national engagement under the conditions you have previously outlined. So
he said the ODM is still in Azimio. You cannot be in Azimio and at the same time in Kenya Kwanza. You have to be one side.
Okay.
I want to believe the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga that for ODM, for all intents and purposes, is still in Azimio, meaning we are still the minority party together. And so none of our members can also be on the side of government in Kenya Kwanza.
All right, and of course, the vetting committee will be looking at the procedure followed in arriving at nominees, and also looking at the legal, that is, constitution and statutory requirements. Nominees' abilities, experience, and qualities needed for the job, the nominees' academic credentials, the professional training, nominees' experience, the personal integrity, and background of all these nominees will be put to question during that vetting. I want us to look at some of the feedback that has come from you, the viewer, at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Citizen Daybreak. This is on X. Bob Otieno is saying that the so-called broad-based agenda is political conmanship. I think we read this, actually. We had read this. We need to go to the next one. And this is Katebesk. You're saying that I fail to understand why His Excellency the President squandered the opportunity to nominate qualified technocrats to help him run his cabinet. He chose to do a roundabout and sneaked in fellow politicians. We have a long way to go. Rafael Biketi, Ruto is just diverting attention from the real issues. He is playing politics instead of tackling the issues raised by young Kenyans. The appointment of new members into the cabinet is conmanship because none of those people ever came forward to raise the issues. Then Treble Macho, does it make sense spending billions to fund an elections if it's right for the winner to form government with the losing candidate? Gabi Wakasiaka, a plea to the president, consider Babu Namwamba on his cabinet. He's an upright man with no history. Well, I think we're not going to use this opportunity for campaigning. But then again, there's another one, Lucky Boy Mainge. From my point of view, the cabinet nominations wasn't a matter of uniting the nation, but uniting the government and opposition, as well as Nyanza and Central Region. Politics of tribalism are taking center stage. I want us to get towards the tail end of the conversation. And let me begin with you this time, again, Honorable Koech, because, yes, many questions, and I think Raila Odinga actually points to some of them in his statement, because he said that the conditions of engagement are compensation to the families of the victims of extrajudicial execution, release of all persons in custody and termination of all cases related to protests since last year, prosecution of policemen involved in shooting to kill or maim protesters. Once upon a time, the President and then Cabinet Secretary for Interior Affairs indicated that only 25 people had died. At the time, there were 41 that had died. Yesterday, the President raised his tally to 42. The KNCHR is talking about 60 people have died. Do you have statistics on how many people have suffered this, but also what needs to be done? Because the DPP has spoken that the files he has cannot stand the test of prosecution. IPOA has said the police are not cooperating to facilitate these investigations. Will there be justice? Because, yes, the President will reconstitute his cabinet, but families that lost their loved ones are still hurting.
It's unfortunate that we had to lose life in this process, and it is unfortunate that at some point there was brute force that was used against an unarmed population. It also behoves the IPOA that it makes sure that it goes beyond just investigating the police officers themselves and taking very critical evidence and from the families that were affected. I even saw a family, I think it was in Kitui or Machakos, a lady who was really trying to, to find justice. There's never been anyone who has taken statements from her or her family, and I think it's important that IPOA too steps up.
But how do they step up if they are saying the police service is not cooperating?
But IPOA does not just take evidence from one person or one section of the police. It also goes to the public. It also uses videos and different mechanisms to make sure that they arrive on pinning down who could be culpable in that. I also want to hope that the President, he is actually demonstrating that he is listening and he is able to act in such a situation. He has promised that he's going to act, and I hope he does so. We as Parliament also have a responsibility in making sure that all those agencies are invited to Parliament to shed more light. We just resumed, we are now on session, and I think it is important for members of Parliament also to take that as an initiative to make sure that we are able to do our own investigation to find out who might have been culpable.
If the President is promising to act, how does action look like?
there are many questions. There are many things that have been raised. You remember, it includes even sending some of the police officers away if they are found to be culpable. So I'm sure it's a broad-based situation on how he's going to handle it. It is not just
the word.
That's the new language.
It is
but divert really.
No, really, Honorable Koech, the family of Rex, the family of Evans Kirato, they're waiting for answers, and so many others out of the 60 people.
It is hurting some. I understand the pain of the family.
Just wait. So when you say that the president has promised to act, and yes, indeed, you've seen changes in the police service. We've seen changes in the prison service. But justice is not changing people's jobs.
Absolutely.
And moving people to different institutions. It is about following the due process of law and saying that indeed this is the person that killed this person, this is the sentence, and this is the compensation from the state.
I like the part that you said following the due process. I am sure that is exactly what is being undertaken, to make sure that the people who are responsible are taken to court and are charged in court. There are cases from way back, like for...
At a time, IPOA feels the National Police Service is frustrating the process of investigation.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the facts of what is really happening. I wouldn't be here to speak about IPOA and how they've been able to gather information, or whether the police are refusing to give them information. And that is why I'm saying, as a member of parliament, it doesn't stop there. My responsibility, too, is to make sure that we invite the responsible agencies to explain to the country what might have happened and what is that IPOA is requesting from the police that are not being given. I think that will be very important, because those are accusations that we are hearing from here, but I do not have the mechanism to verify what has been said. But to be very honest, something has to be done. It is wrong. People should not die in protest, especially when they are unarmed. But at the same time, we must be very careful also on where police officers have also suffered. You saw a case in Bondo of civilians beating up a police officer. You've seen cases where young people go and poke the noses of police officers who are simply guarding them. I mean, such situations
has action been taken in that particular matter? I'm
sure both cases should be taken. So where there's been provocation, outright provocation of our police officers, action too must be taken.
You don't know if it's been taken or not?
No, I do not know.
Okay, Wanjiru, so what does accountability, what should accountability look like in such a scenario? Because every time a death is reported, and actually on Citizen TV, we featured families that have gone to the city mortuary, they are looking for their loved ones, they find them, and they are registered to have died in Juja, yet the bodies were collected in Kitengela. They were actually protesting in Kitengela. Post-mortem is done, it is determined of how they died, the bullet is taken out, yet investigations are supposed to match that bullet to the gun it came from.
Exactly, that looks like an attempt at cover-up. First of all, the statements of the president on the conduct of the police have constantly been to congratulate the police in how they've handled the protests. Now, what do you read from that when you have peaceful protests being tear gassed, being water cannoned, and then using rubber bullets and of course light bullets, and then the president stands up and says they've conducted themselves well? He's continually reinforced that, apart from the recent stepping down of the IG. So the president is talking out, is very inconsistent on this. And based on his public statements, we can only assume the communication to the police, including the rogue police, including the abductions, because let's not forget there are about 400 plus abductions that have taken place back to the Moi days, in fact, the darkest Moi days. So what do we read from that? We read really the state has given license to the police to shoot peaceful protesters. So it's not people have died, it's they've been shot and executed by the police in exercising Article 37. So I would have liked, and then I'm not sure, you know, off the camera I had asked Koech, do chairs of parliamentary committees have performance requirements? Because 6 weeks or almost 7 going on into 2 months since the first killing at the hands of police, it is not in order to really sit here and say you don't know, you don't have facts, because those implicated police officers, some of whom were even shown on video, their faces were shown. We've also seen armed but in civilian clothes, officers who are marauding with the youth. So how do we allow this? Are we a police state? Are we a state that has a constitution law that guides the conduct of police? So the conduct of police is to protect and serve the public and to uphold human rights and constitutionalism. That is the standard that has been breached by our security forces. There is also bringing out of the military. Now, the military were brought out at a time when the country, of course, was under Gen Z protest, not external attack. And people said, why has the military come out against protest on the finance bill? Because that's the point where Parliament went against the public sentiment, went against youth sentiment, went against public expertise, and passed a finance bill that is really not good for this country. That was then withdrawn by the president, but then the provisions of that bill, withdrawn law, are now being enacted through various other. So the problem we have really is a political leadership that refuses to listen, a political leadership that through Auditor General reports is shown to be corrupt. And I think at the heart of what we have is a lack of constitutionalism. So we have William Ruto, who has shown himself to be a very astute politician. But when it comes to governing, that he's fallen very short. And in fact, he's become, it's a liability to this country, because what we are lacking is public confidence in public institutions. And instead of shoring up that confidence, it's a repeat of the same shenanigans that have undermined the legitimacy of this government. So what Koech should do when he speaks to his principal is tell him, listen, let us stop this grandstanding and being so defensive and imagining it's all about us. This is about a country called Kenya, where a majority of the public have lost confidence in the political leadership because they know as long as you are in the political interest and camp, you will continue to survive in public office, whether it's in the security forces, whether it's in a public service office, whether it's in a cabinet office, as long as you're calling the tune of the political leadership. And this political leadership, unfortunately, does not have a sense of the public good. So we are in a crisis, but the crisis we are in is that our constitution does not give us provision to impeach a president who has failed and to impeach a government that has failed. And this government has failed to, even after 60 deaths, to call itself to account. Listening to what Koech is saying here, I'm seeing people who are intransigent. They are unable to realize that Kenyans are unhappy. And this was the only way they could communicate, because they ignored the submissions that were made in the House.
Honorable Mbui, then, is there any chance of justice? Because even in 2023, when people were shot and killed by police officers, I have no record of any successful prosecution and justice being served.
You know, this thing is, it looks like it's business as usual. I was involved in a demonstration way back after the last elections. You know, we went to receive our leader then of NASA, Raila Amolo Odinga, from the airport. And in the whole of that, you know, the hula baloo, my leg was broken. I ended up in hospital for a month. I struggled up to now. I still have, you know, the metal, whatever rod, they call it a pin, that still holds my leg together. And of course, the zero compensation. Nobody listens to you, and it's just a story, you know. And now, you know, it's a very unfortunate situation we're in, because we now have also, you know, parents who have lost their young ones, and like even before, some of the ones that are dying now are very, very young. You know, people in college, people in universities, that generation, that age of between 27 and below, a lot of them are dying around that age. And some of them have been abducted, some have been, you know, severely hurt. Let's not even talk about the ones who died only. The people are alive, but you know, they're limping and they're hurt. But then, you know, there seems to be no end in sight. If they go back to the streets, chances are that the police will do it again, over and over again. So I don't know. I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. based on the way this regime is handling these demonstrations. And let me say this, that it's good Honorable Koech is here. Maybe he can explain to us, because when the youth hit the streets and the police, who are able to use batons, water cannons, tear gas canisters, rubber bullets, some of them went excessively and started using live bullets. But, you know, Koech, as a chairman of defense and his team, they allowed the military now from the barracks to join the street, you know, to join the police in the streets. You know, now, unlike the police, the military, then they use assault rifles and grenades and tankers and bombs. I've never understood exactly what they were supposed to go and do, you know, in confronting our youth. Wasn't it enough that the police have killed so many of them already, that you bring in the military, which is supposed to deal with external aggression? So I don't know. I'm very concerned. But as Azimio, we have said that before we have any, you know, for us to be talking about positions, I mean, today we are talking about who has been nominated to be CS, I don't know, from ODM. Before we talk about such things, we should have dealt with the matters of compensation and justice for those victims of this police brutality. In fact, like I was here last time and somebody was saying that people are dancing on the graves of these young people. It is anyone that is talking about positions. You know, that is why as Wiper we've said we are not talking about positions. We are more interested in sorting out this mess. And you know, President Ruto in the last campaigns, he was very clear. He said, you know, there are people who are always talking about positions. Unfortunately, it has come out that he continuously keeps using positions, you know, as a way of getting out of every political situation, because he even introduced a position of prime CS, which is not even in the constitution. So I think at the end of the day, I don't know. I think Kenya has a long way to go, and that's why we need to figure out how do we get to heal this country. What do we need to do? That national convention, I think, is important. We need to talk to each other, but not about positions, not about sharing power, but about fairness and justice, and dealing with making the country a country that is fair for all of us.
Okay, I think there's a fair question there, Honorable Koech. Do you have any status report of what the KDF have been able to achieve since deployment?
KDF were only deployed to deal with a situation that we had at hand at that point, which was extremely becoming difficult for the police themselves to manage. Let me tell you, Sam, and like I say all the time, as a country we were degenerating. As a country, a peaceful demonstration was turning out to be something different. From attack to Parliament and an attempt to stage a walk-in to State House was becoming extremely a national security issue. Anyone trying to attempt
showing that people wanted to go
to State House, of course, that was going to overthrow our constitution.
There was intelligence saying that people...
There was intelligence, of course. By the time they had broken into Parliament, of course, intelligence was heightened, and it was necessary at that point to make sure that the country was able to hold.
Was there intelligence they were going to reach Parliament?
National security, sorry?
Was there intelligence they were going to get into Parliament?
That we'll get to that later, not at this point. There was intelligence that was going to be an attempt to get into Parliament, but I think they minimized the magnitude of that protest. They did not anticipate that there were people who were going to hijack a peaceful process to score, to make certain scores.
What do you mean they minimized?
It was not as it turned out to be. Of course, it was going to be. If it was going to be a normal demonstration, it was okay. Our young people, like Gikonyo was saying, only had cameras and coffee.
Sorry, you're saying,
and they were okay to demonstrate with.
Let's get this right. You're saying there was intelligence showing that.
No, Sam, you have this tendency of really interrupting my flow of thoughts.
And I apologize for that. I just need clarity on what you've just said. Yes. There was intelligence that protesters were going to get into Parliament.
There's intelligence that there was going to be demonstration, okay? Whether they were going to get into Parliament, a protected area, was not there. Because no one anticipates that anyone will go down criminality and get into Parliament, a protected area. So, of course, there are people who use that opportunity to have criminals get access to Parliament forcefully. And that is where the issue was. No one anticipates that a crime will happen where there has been an allowed demonstration of young people.
Honorable Koech, you've lost me because you've changed your answer.
This is my point. I don't work for the National Intelligence Service. My point is this. In my view, and from an official interaction with the people who gather intelligence information, is that there might have been minimization of the magnitude of the demonstration on the day Parliament was invaded by protesters, because in their view, the assumption was there was going to be peaceful processions,
and on that day,
not criminals who are going to try to gain access.
Sam, allow me to ask a question.
And on that day, 6 people died.
Can I
That's what I'm saying. And number two, I really want us
prior to the so-called invasion. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Parliament is the House of Representatives. I don't support vandalism of any sort, but this idea of breach, our language is missing the point of our democracy, because the authority given to our legislators is delegated from the public.
Absolutely.
And where the legislators have failed, the public are unable to recall that authority because we don't have a provision in the Constitution. This is the gap that forced Gen Z onto the street. Now, prior to the breach, I told you I was in that demonstration, and some of my colleagues were actually manning the health rescue, the medical rescue desk. Yep. And by that time, they had recorded 4 shootings. So there were shootings. There were shootings even prior. So as chair of defense, your answers are woefully inadequate, because you should be explaining to us why were police shooting protesters.
I am saying this is a protected area, okay?
Right.
The people went in there. The people who banned representatives who are elected.
Why have to go to they should have been arrested.
When you set a section of Parliament on fire, when you forcefully gain entry into Parliament, there is an armory there in Parliament. There are police officers there. They have been deployed there to guard Parliament as an institution, not because Nelson Koech is in Parliament at that point in time, but to safeguard the sanctity of Parliament. There is a big problem by allowing people and lawlessness for people to raid Parliament. These are elected representatives. So you cannot decide today and jump through the barrier and go into Parliament.
That's fine. Honorable Mbui, straight answer. Is there any probe into what happened on 25th of June at Parliament?
So far, I don't know.
Is there, Honorable Koech?
Honorable Mbui is my senior, I should say. He's a deputy minority. There is a probe that is ongoing on people who try to gain access to Parliament. There will be arrests because it's a criminal offense.
Is there a probe by Parliament? That's what I'm asking.
There has not been any probe by Parliament, but there is an initiation of a process of evidence gathering by the CCTVs and individuals who are culpable.
Who's doing that?
It's our parliamentary security in joint operation with our National Police Service.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nelson Koech.
And finally, let us be responsible as a media.
Member of Parliament for Belgut constituency and chairperson, Defense, Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committee of the National Assembly, Wanjiru Gikonyo, who is a transformative governance expert, and Honorable Robert Mbui, Deputy Leader of Minority at the National Assembly. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again tomorrow, same time on Daybreak.